Tonight, President Trump's plan to pay for that border wall is coming under new scrutiny.
And it's creating new tensions with the government south of the border. KCAL 9 political reporter Bryan joins us now with more on why the diplomatic tensions are creating concerns about a trade war. Dave?
Yeah, it's certainly a possibility. Tomorrow marks 1 week that Donald Trump has been president. Already he may be facing his first real international crisis building. The opening salvos in what could grow into a trade war were fired today after the president of Mexico canceled a meeting with President Trump planned for next week in a protest over the border wall. And the President Trump, suggested the wall could be paid for by tariffs on imported Mexican goods. After his first flight on Air Force One, President Trump rallied his fellow Republicans at a GOP retreat in Philadelphia. But the meeting was overshadowed by the rising tension between the U.S. and Mexico and a series of events that could be the opening shots of a full-blown trade war. It started with President Trump's executive order to kick off construction of the border wall and continued demands that Mexico will pay for it. That didn't go over too well with Mexico's president.
México no pagará ningún muro.
In response to Trump's demands, Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto tweeted that he was calling off a planned meeting with Mr. Trump in Washington next week to express his displeasure. And as the relationship begins to sour by the hour, Trump responded too.
The President of Mexico and myself have agreed to cancel our planned meeting scheduled for next week. Unless Mexico is going to treat the United States fairly, with respect, such a meeting would be fruitless, and I want to go a different route. We have no choice. The American people will not pay for the wall, and I've made that clear to the government of Mexico.
Mr. Trump went on to suggest the different route is the border wall could be paid for by imposing tariffs for goods imported into America.
Well, we're working on a tax reform bill that will reduce our trade deficits, increase American exports, and will generate revenue from Mexico that will pay for the wall if we decide to go that route.
Trump's press secretary went even further, telling reporters aboard Air Force One that a 20% tax on imports would generate plenty of funding to build the border wall.
By doing it that way, we can do $10 billion a year and easily pay for the wall just through that mechanism alone. That's really going to provide the funding.
But at the White House, Chief of Staff Reince Priebus quickly pulled back Spicer's statement, declaring that the notion of a tariff is only one of a buffet of options for funding the wall construction. And aides indicated such an import tax could be anywhere from 5 to 20%. Either way, the stakes are high. Mexico is America's third biggest trading partner, totaling more than $500 billion annually, helping to support more than 1 million American jobs. And the tariff for goods imported from Mexico would ultimately be paid by American consumers, including vehicles made by American companies but assembled in Mexico. They're the top import, $74 billion worth last year. We spent $9.1 billion on fruits and vegetables grown in Mexico in 2016. 80% of all of our avocados come from south of the border. And we buy a lot of beer, wine, and tequila from Mexico. $3.8 billion worth last year. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham tweeted about that in good humor. Simply put, any policy proposal which drives up the cost of Corona, tequila, or margaritas is a big-time bad idea. Mucho sad. President Trump also blasted the NAFTA free trade treaty with Mexico and Canada, which is supported by many Republicans in Congress.
NAFTA has been a terrible deal, a total disaster for the United States from its inception, costing us as much as $60 billion a year with Mexico alone in trade deficits.
I don't see any benefit in trying to crawl back into our shell as a country. We can't do that economically. We're obviously next door to Mexico. As I frequently tell my friends in Mexico, I said, we can't get a divorce. We need to figure out how to make this marriage work.
Now, President Trump's expected to sign another executive order shortly that would suspend the U.S. refugee program for 120 days. The Associated Press reports the order will include an indefinite suspension of refugee processing for Syrians who are fleeing that country's chaos and bloodshed, and that could be signed in the next couple of days.
Yeah, Dave, why do you think the president is moving so aggressively and so quickly to try to get Mexico to pay for this wall?
Well, like I said, he hasn't even been in office a year. How about a week, right? So he's moving quickly. I think there are a couple of forces at work here. First of all, the Trump administration has learned from the Obama presidency, get as much done early before the midterm elections as you can, because after 2 years, Republicans could lose control of the House or Senate, and that would complicate getting Trump's more controversial projects done in the final 2 years of his first term. And then second, I think the administration has made a calculated decision to make an example out of Mexico, because you can be sure every other country is watching to see how this conflict plays out and whether President Trump can force Mexico to get his way. Peter.